Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Fischer, the host of the Cult Following podcast. Cult Following is a podcast that studies the personalities and common traits of cult leaders and their followers. Get the real story behind these infamous and oftentimes tragic cults from a new perspective through exhaustive research and from interviews with people that were there. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of No Earthly Explanation with your host, Brittany Barbieri, and of course, my fantastic partner in crime and other host, Don Schmidt. Don, how have you been, my friend? We have a really fun show tonight.
I'm well, Britt, and I'm happy that you are, and we're always happy to be back with our audience and our second season of No Earthly Explanation. See how I forget. I because it's a unique title. Well, it better be unique because it's ours. It's the name of our show. So yeah. I know we don't have a guest tonight, so it involves us. So what do we have on tap for the audience this evening?
Well, for right now, we are bringing in our producer, Todd, and he is coming in to join us on our show tonight with hopefully some really fun questions. So let's get right into it. Todd Fischer, how are you? It is so good to see your face.
Hi, Britt. Hi, Don. Good to see you all. Good to be back for season 2.
Absolutely. And everyone said we would never make it. Wow. I mean, I'm kidding. No, that was just between the three of us.
Yeah, we thought no one would listen. But they're listening, so we're back for season 2.
Off the show, we're mortal enemies, so we don't get along at all. That's why we're doing this from a long distance.
Right. Yeah.
Never talk.
We've been frenemies for like 20 years, 25 years.
I know. A lot of fun. We talked about the other evening, and so many good times, so many good memories, and so many friends that are now gone. Departed people that I think of the David Prouses and the Richard Hatches and others that we're friends to, that you could sit with and not only talk shop with, but as far as personal things, family and friends, and that type of thing.
I'm working on year 1 of Britt being a frenemy.
Oh boy.
And so I find the older yes.
There will be times she'll be incredibly happy to know me, and other times she'll be so mad at me, and other times I'll bring her to tears. It's going to be a whirlwind relationship, Britt.
I already am prepared for that. Yes, I am already prepared.
Well, let's jump into this. So while we were on hiatus, we got lots of questions in. So last year, our Q&A episode was one of our highest rated episodes. So I thought, let's do this again. A lot of new questions, and I'm curious what you all come up with, what you have to answer. A couple of these are directed to, to you all specifically, and others are just, hey, up in the air, whoever wants to answer them. So let's kick it off. So the first question is, what is one of the most bizarre UFO cases you have ever heard of?
Oh,
ladies first.
Me?
Yes, ladies first.
Oh man. Honestly, I know it's one that's talked about a lot, but the Molstrom case is honestly probably one of the most bizarre for me, just because of how it all went down, and the most questionable for a military base case. So for me, that's a bizarre one right off the top of my head, because I've been looking into that one again and reading it and researching it all over again. Of course, because of now like the heavy debate going on with it. And it just still is very bizarre to me on how it all went down. And it's very fascinating.
Why don't you go into a little detail for the audience that they know what you're talking of?
So this particular case, now Don, correct me if I'm wrong, the year was in the 70s?
Yes.
Yes. And so at the time they had several gentlemen were out at a base, and of course this was a missile base at the time, and there was an aircraft that was seen, and I think it was a total of 5 missiles. Was 5 missiles correct, or was it 9? I always get the
9.
numbers mixed up. It was 9,
9.
right? 9. Okay.
Correct.
So all of a sudden, when this object appeared over the base, 9 of those missiles went go, no go. They were literally just turned off like that without any, no sound, from this craft that was above, no sound from, I mean, it happened so fast, instantaneously. And several of the gentlemen saw it. And it was a very high case at the time, a high level case at the time, because it was more or less whose technology is out there on this case, or pertaining to this case, that could turn off 9 missiles like that with no sound. Who could do that? What are we looking at as a friend or a foe here? And it became a very large investigative case for public safety and a hazard case and so much more. And it became a very historical case on that respect alone. And it continued on until today, because it became a heavy debate that it didn't happen the way it happened. It's impossible. And there was a heavy debate on I believe it was Larry King Live, had several of the gentlemen that were there with
It kept the Robert Salas and Dr. Robert Jacobs.
Yes, but the science guy, why I'm blanking my name on the science
Bill
guy.
Nye.
Bill Nye. That's it. And he was sitting
Bill
there.
Nye, the no science guy.
The no science guy, yeah. And he was sitting there and became a little combative and almost kind of in a put down manner to these gentlemen who were there, who had witnessed it. And I still remember seeing that myself, and I was proud of them for standing up for what they saw, because they were there at the time of the event. And granted, it's baffling to scientists and to other experts that believe that there's just no way that it could possibly happen the way it did or go down the way it did. The fact is that it did. And this happened during a time where we were in very unsure waters of territory with other countries. And it was a very important case that we really needed to bring a lot of attention to. And yet people just kind of, it seemed combative in a sense to say it didn't happen the way it happened. And it was a really important case. And it was very bizarre to me on how it happened, the time of night that it happened. And it was a singular object, no go, no go, nine missiles. And then you have all these personnel that are saying, I saw it with my own eyes. I witnessed this. And yet it was completely broken down into just nothingness, in the sense of that these men didn't see what they saw. And it's just bizarre and disturbing. And again, it's a huge awareness in the UFO community on what we deal with, even in the professional eyes of military service and active men dealing with this, or pilot. It's a huge case.
These were 9 Atlas missiles, and the year was 1967. So I
67. Okay, so 7. Okay. For some reason I had 72 in my head, but yeah. And again, it just baffles the mind, because it was such an extraordinary case, and the details in that case alone are really what get me. And again, you have an object that they identified so clearly. I just don't understand. And it's a bizarre case. It's just a bizarre case to me throughout history. It's just one of the bizarre.
Do you have one?
I'll harken back to my former scientific director, Dr. Jalen Heineck, and the last interview he did, which was with Omni Magazine, the late former Omni Magazine, was when he was asked if he had one thing that he could still do within his life. And he responded that to be snowbound in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with a captive audience. Because whenever our guard was down, whenever we would dine, whenever we would sit after a meeting or something, and then it was like everything was open to the table to speak freely as to some of the most bizarre UFO cases that you ever were involved with. And more times than not, these involve the so-called abduction experiences. And often when the late Bud Hopkins, who was famous for his book Intruders and other abduction accounts, he recounted to us one particular tale, one particular story involving parents with a a young child, young son, all of 5 years old. And night after night, the little boy would come screaming as he'd be racing down the hallway to his parents' bedroom and come rushing into the room. They're trying to take me. They're trying to take me. The little men are trying to take me. And his father would always, no, son, I'll show you. There's nobody there. We'll take you back to your room. You're just having a bad dream. Nothing to worry about. And so after he would comfort, console his little son, and this happened night after night after night. And the parents were getting more and more perturbed at the fact that, my God, is this going to end? Do we need to take him to some type of doctor or psychiatrist or something? Because he's imagining things that at his age, there must be some other stimulus going on, some other malady, and they were becoming concerned that it was something both psychological and physical. So it happens one more night. They hear him screaming coming down the hallway. And the father jumps out of bed before he even enters the room. And I've had it. I'm going to put an end to this tonight. And he steps into the hallway in time to see behind his son, running behind his child, a short little gray figure with the large eyes. And he stands there aghast. And as the little man, comes to an abrupt stop and almost like just pulling a curtain, he described how it just stood there for a moment and it just faded out as it moved to the side, as it just kind of disappeared, going from right to left, left to right, but nonetheless, it was gone. And his son jumped up into his arms and he said, "Now do you believe me, Daddy?" And it's like, so often where we think that we can just, well, what were you smoking? What were you drinking? Where were you? That type of thing. We have to always ask, and I've often reminded reporters about this, that they have to come away from a story, no matter how unbelievable, and they at least have to ask themselves, what if they're telling the truth?
Right.
If you do that, Britt and I do that. You do that, Todd. You can't help for having heard some of the most outlandish, most unbelievable stories of all that one can imagine. And if they turn out to be true, it creates an environment for the next and the next and the next, to the point that you realize there is cause for concern and legitimate research and investigation for the unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like I wrote in my first dedication to my parents in my very first book, that they taught me that there's no such thing as impossible. And I've lived that for all these years. There's no such thing as impossible. That remains within the mindset of the skeptic, the debunker.
Might be impossible to get all 10 questions in on this episode, though. We keep taking 15 minutes on all these. We're going to get like 4 questions tonight, guys.
Sorry, I'll make mine short and sweet.
Same here.
No kidding. I love these stories, but we might have 4 episodes worth of Q&A. I got here's another for you.
And sometimes only one of us will answer too. So
true.
I have a Bill Nye story. You guys have to cue me on that someday. I'll tell you my experience with him. But
okay.
So why does there appear to be a moratorium against the truth on so many fronts today?
Don, you can start with this one.
okay. Or I could just answer it.
Yeah, just go ahead.
It would appear that the more, it's almost a return to the Dark Ages in many respects, in that back then you had essentially a king and the Pope, the church, and that people allied with either one or the other. And this whole situation now where even the subject of UFOs has become like a religion to many people. And it has served as a wedge with officialdom in that the CIA, for having created the very term conspiracy kook, that anytime someone speaks outside of the norm, expresses a concern outside of the status quo, they're immediately labeled, they're immediately called, some type of a fringe, reactionary.
Yeah.
There's someone who is a charlatan who is out to exploit, an experience, what have you. And because we rely so much on the entertainment field, and there's so much subliminal propaganda that we're bombarded with, and now with social media, there's a fine line between reality and non-reality. And I'm afraid it's becoming more and more fuzzy, to the point that the United States government could announce tomorrow that we are being visited, we are not alone, that the UFO phenomenon has turned out to be real. Half the people still wouldn't believe it because they've been so conditioned. So this idea that truth will always win out, well, it comes down to whose truth. It comes down to, as far as science, which has now become science by consensus.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer where I can demonstrate it and peer review, and it's actually repeatable within a laboratory. It's all become very gray. That's my concern, that UFOs so often become part of that gray basket. And as a result, it's not looked at seriously, it's not considered as legitimate, and as a result, the powers that be tend to have the final word on it. And then it's another whole discussion if you talk about the willing accomplices in the media, and all they do is run interference in so many incidents for the truth. And that's where, as our program, No Earthly Explanation, we're willing to look at the truth, no matter what it happens to be. Let's follow the evidence. Let's see where it takes us for a change. And I think that's why this show is going to be unique in that regard.
Agreed.
I think just to add to your point, and I'll move on here, Don, I think there might be a little bit more to add to that, in that this moratorium against the truth. I think sometimes this is just a system of control. And if let's just say, if all of this is real, right? If UFOs are real, we've been visited by extraterrestrials, people maybe high up in the government know that. If there are beings out there with this type of superior technology, and even kind of going back to, this bizarre UFO incident you talked about early on in the show, with the missiles, if they have this type of tech, we should be terrified of that. So the system of control is keep it quiet from the public. Do whatever you can to suppress that, because if you give the public time to think about this, they'll realize that we're probably outmatched. And that could be incredibly dangerous. Or they're keeping it a secret from us just for that reason, that, we could be wiped out or get a alien disease, or, whatever it might be. That's
because
we don't need a panic on our hands, right?
They can't, they couldn't protect us. They couldn't protect themselves if they had to. And so to maintain their level of control against the phenomenon that is able to fly through our airspace with total impunity, I mean, it comes down to, the longer we can prevent the public from knowing the truth, the better it is for us, not the public, but for them, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah.
We agree. We agree.
Which this kind of leads into the next question, really, and that is, do you believe that the scientific community remains honorable, or has it too become corrupted? Well, first, I think you have to say there's always going to be money attached to this,
Of
right?
course.
So
Of
you talk about the
course.
scientific community. What funds the scientific community?
Yeah, exactly. If speaking on my side, from what I see, especially in the research that I've seen, I think there is some slight corrupt on it. I think there is a little bit of a drive, and of course, I think there's more of an agenda, so it has to follow the suit of that agenda. And I think that it all comes back again to like a mass control or a fear control of we have to control at this point what we fear, and what we fear we don't understand. And so we have to drive that through even science to have our back with this, because the public in most regards will listen to science. So if science comes out and says that, let's just throw it out and just say it's not possible. There's no we know the planets, we know all this stuff. It's not possible that there's anything from anywhere else. We're the only ones. We're the only life. Most of the public is going to go, oh, see, science proved it. So why are these, crazy people still talking about these aliens coming from another planet? It's not possible. The science already proved it by numbers and statistics, and it's like, no, you can't. You have to like really follow the trail. And then you have to look in-house of science, because a lot of times in-house science, you have scientists that are actually fighting each other on the topic at hand or about the evidence, and they rebuttal it. They go back and forth. They will, oh, I didn't mean to say it like that. Let me take it back and let me rephrase it. And it's like, no, you said what you said and you made your point. And so I do think that there is slight of a corruption in some of it. And I think that as some of the other scientists are kind of thrown into that, unfortunately. And that's why there's a debate with inside the scientist community about this. In a whole, where they battle it, and some scientists come out and say, we've already proven it. We know that there's extraterrestrial life, and we already know that we're being visited from, otherworldly beings. And then, then it turns the science literally up on its head, and it gets them all in an uproar at each other. So it's really hard, but I do think there is some corruption there.
I will not only agree, but I'll take it even a step further. I feel that most science is corrupted, and much of it originated prior to the splitting of the atom, prior to the atomic bomb. The chemists were the number one hard science in the world. Immediately after the bomb, it's been the physicists. And a good example was when Pons and Fleischmann thought that they had discovered fusion, that they had cracked as far as fusion, as far as technology. And they were just viciously attacked. Two chemists, and they were viciously attacked by physicists, not their peers, but by as far as branch of the scientific research was. And I cite the best example that most people are familiar with, the late Carl Sagan. At the beginning of Sagan's career, he was very pro-UFO. He actually wrote pro-UFO papers. And the moment he became contracted with grants and was specially funded by the government, he became one of their chief debunkers. He sold his soul. And I see that that's the case with most scientists, that the moment they're on the dole, the moment that they are connected as far as, and they receive, they're biting the hand that feeds them if they do not, if they veer from the script at all. These are your marching orders. This is what you will say.
Yeah.
And to me, that has corrupted much of the field, much of the profession. And sadly, the adage, follow the science. No, follow who pays them. And you will find that just like, quickly, I'm always asked, like, if you guys find a piece of Roswell debris, where do you go? Well, we can't go. In fact, when we have found things, we've had to go out of the country. You cannot go to any national laboratory in America. And isn't it interesting, fascinating, that every laboratory in America is contracted by the US government? And I'm one who's here this evening who's going to say that's mainly in the event that if anyone should ever provide anything, any evidence that the government needs to know about, they're right there to take it.
Yeah.
For that simple reason. And it's worked all these years, because we could have a whole show about all the times that people have turned in potential physical evidence of a UFO, and it magically just disappears. It just always photographs, hardware, pieces of slag, pieces of debris from an alleged crash, and it just always manages, oh, that folder is empty. I don't know what happened.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
Corrupted.
So the next question. Oh, the next question is, why is there such a divide in supporting each other when investigating?
Oh man. So, I have recently been experiencing this, as I've shared with Don. It really, it's a touchy subject, and I wish there wasn't such a divide, because the whole goal is for transparency and all of us to work together to push for the greater good, as they say. And sometimes I feel that there's jealousy involved. Sometimes I feel like some of the critics are, they want to be relevant. Some, I feel their goal in life is to basically disprove any existence of anything, like anything, not even just UFOs. So they're hell bent on just being very analytical, very debunking, and trying to make it more placed into more of a natural mindset, instead of looking at things as impossible, or as looking at things as possible instead of impossible. And I feel like nowadays, because, and I think Don might even agree, I think nowadays it's gotten even worse, because now we have television shows, we have social media that has exploded. And it almost feels to me that everybody wants to be a name in the game. And not even if they don't even know the history of stuff, if they don't even really know all the facts, they just want to be relevant. And I feel that if somebody else is actually doing a really good investigation or doing a really good job on something, it's like, well, how come I didn't know about this? Well, now I'm going to come in and step in and just take it over and make it look like I had all the answers and you didn't. And I just feel that all of that type of personality is actually hurting and harming the goal at hand. And I've seen it a lot. And I think a lot has to point to television, because people just want to be the famous UFO expert, or the famous face behind the UFO incidences. And did you see me on this? And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we could just go back to where we did this because we had a passion for it, we loved it, and we supported each other. But unfortunately, I feel like the divide is happening more so now, because social media, the media, and TV shows have played a huge hand in that because people want to have the most followers and be the most relevant. And it's sad. It makes me sad, because that's not what it should be about. It's supposed to be about the eyewitnesses, what they're seeing, the investigation at hand, and finding the truth and pushing for transparency for all of those involved. And we should all support each other. And I've seen a lot lately that has made me very sad, that I feel though there is a good part of the UFO community still, but I feel that there is still another part that's getting corrupted by all of that outside influences. And I'm sure Don can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my take on it, being kind of thrown into it right now.
Well, first of all, there is no such thing whenever anyone is introduced or passes themselves off as a UFO expert. That's a misnomer to begin with, because how can one be an expert on something that remains a mystery?
Right.
And secondly,
Right.
most of it comes from the skeptical, or I should say the debunking camp, in that they still insist on controlling the narrative, that it's their way or no way, that automatically they'll never, I mean, when we've had archaeological digs, we've invited debunkers to join us. Well, they flatly refuse, because my God, can you imagine we would find something and they would have to then be party to the fact that we proved them wrong, and all their colleagues after all these years. So that's the disconnect. And I stopped suffering these people years ago, because they contribute nothing. They'll be remembered for nothing, because again, they have provided nothing as far as progress, nothing in coming up with a final resolution. It's easy to personally attack. It's easy, as far as, especially with social media, to go into name calling and attack one's research. But we're the ones that have always, why don't you accompany us? Why don't you walk in our shoes? Why don't you talk to this witness? A quick example would be the late skeptic to my face was saying, Don, and we always got along. I don't deny that. But he said, Don, you know, your witnesses at Roswell, they're all elderly people. You can't believe anyone after the age of 70. Their failing memories, you know, cannot be trusted. And I went, well, Phil, how old are you? And he wouldn't answer me. And I said, well, I know how old you are. You're 72. So I guess so much for my trusting your, you know, our conversation right now. So yeah. they wanted to go in one way as well, and it doesn't. I always cite the Ramachan effect, which is a Japanese murder trial from 1950, and where the judge demonstrated to the jury that there are 3 points of view to every event.
Right.
There's your opinion, there's my opinion, and then there's what really happened. And the point being, who is making every effort to determine what really happened? And I'm sorry, the debunkers have a dismal track record. They sit at the convenience. They typically sit, in their parents' basements, and they solve every mystery that has ever befallen as far as mankind. Sorry, no, that's not making any effort to determine what really happened. We're making that effort, and we have all the miles as far as on our frequent flyer,
right.
as far as status approval.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, Todd.
I just want to add one point to it. And that is, you know, social media certainly changed the world, but the internet in general has also changed the world. I know my books that came out took a really long time to make because I needed the world to get smaller, and that could only happen with the birth of the internet. So the first 10 years of writing the first Metatomics book was a really long, slow process until I could get access to things better. And using this as an example, Don came into this as an investigator, really kind of pre-internet, pre-social media. And I think what you really get is you get those real, and gumshoe is not the right word I want to use, but like you get the real hardcore investigators because, you know, there was no getting on the internet to do things. There was no internet celebrity. Don went out as a real investigator to real places and tracked down real people that he interviewed and compiled his research and was able to put together a good enough narrative to then get a book deal to publish a book in a time where you couldn't print on demand. So this is a real deal guy on this show. And today you don't get that. No one wants to go through that kind of work. They want to rely on everyone else's evidence. All they want is about the fans and the followers and not the real work. And that's the difference. And that's why this is a great show with a really, I know Don just avoided the term expert a little while ago, but with this show with a real expert, you know?
Yeah. So no, I agree. I agree with you 100%. Yep.
It's completely a different method of investigating things for sure.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I on that all the time.
You're essentially, and to use that term, you're returning back to the scene of the crime. You're actually looking for fingerprints. You're actually tracking down witnesses. You're actually interviewing people who at times slam the door in your face, threaten to call the police that you're trespassing on their property. I can't tell both of you how often we have had the phone slammed in our ears, and yet you still continue because there's this commitment, there's this level of devotion in finishing the investigation. And I'm sorry, there isn't a debunker in the world that can claim that. I'm sorry, there aren't. And I've debated all of you. I've been involved with all of you. You sit there and all you do is solve every mystery at your keyboard. And you pat yourselves on the back as though you've done something heroic.
And Don,
I'll say it again. You're cowards. You're cowards.
Oh, Don's getting hostile now. No, I want to say one more thing too. I tell you one more problem with the kind of the YouTube social media people that do this kind of thing is they really hurt it for the legitimate investigators, because what you get is you get a bunch of people with their Batman shirts and their cargo shorts and all their equipment trespassing on land and knocking on doors and ruining things because eventually people don't want you on their property anymore. They don't want you to visit that haunted location anymore. They don't want you driving your cars out into the desert thinking, oh, it's just desert. It doesn't belong to anyone. And then that hurts it for the people that are really doing the proper work.
Right.
Yep, it does.
Right.
That's why I have said, and I know Don and I have talked about this numerous times, and our friend Ben, we've talked with Ben about it. There's a need and a want for a level up in investigations. And that level up, basically, Todd, at the end of the day, is what you just mentioned. The level up is not the social media aspect or from my keyboard aspect. It's taking us back to what made us investigators to begin with. That's the level up. Your due diligence is the case and those that are involved in the case, and you need to do the work all the way through, just like a crime scene. And,
the question was, why is there such a divide in supporting each other when investigating? And there's two answers, really. Yeah. Because in a way, we do want teamwork. We do want people on the same team, good people. And at the same time, we kind of want the divide because you want to separate the pros from the A-ball people, And it's just like, so there's really probably no real answer to this question, but it can be answered two ways. And I think we covered both.
Let me quickly cite the worst example of social media bias, and that the late nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman would call me time and time again, Don, we have to rewrite the WikiLeaks, we have to rewrite the Wikipedia entry on Roswell because it's 100% skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would do that. We would interject. We wouldn't, we would just add our opposing viewpoint. Well, no matter how often we did it, within 24 hours, ours was taken down. Who's doing that? Who's making that decision? Who makes that call? The point is, we're the ones being deprived. Yeah, kids in basements. We're being deprived as far as our freedom of speech, our freedom of voice and opposing viewpoint, and yet they have the final say. And so we finally just gave up. So much for social media presenting as far as an accurate portrayal of world history. Again,
well, and I want to say just one thing. It's funny because in the industry that we've all been in and worked in, it's really funny, even the mindset of those, even like in the casting directors that reach out to these individuals, including myself or to Don or whoever. And it's always like, well, send me all the video you have of you out in the field and investigating. And it cracks me up when they say that, because when I'm really in the field and I'm really investigating, I'm not filming myself. I'm not filming the people I'm talking to. I'm not filming the location. I'm not filming myself. So I get in a pickle because I'm like, I don't really have a lot of footage of myself outside of maybe a show that I was an appearance on, or I was asked to come and join a crew on a mission and they've gotten a couple, pictures of me, or a couple night watches. I have a photo of me staring up to a black sky. But I don't do that when I myself am asked to go on a case, because it's not about me and getting gratification for my social media page. It's me helping the person calling. So I always find it really, really funny that there's that assumption that's like, you don't have video, you don't have audio of you doing all this, that, and the other. It's like, no, I don't. I'm sorry, because I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for the reason at hand, which is to get the job done and find out what's going on.
Yep.
Amen. I'm in the exact same situation.
All right, let's move on. Will Don and Britt be making any appearances at events this year?
Well, yeah.
We're doing that book signing at the 7-Eleven in Bug Tussle.
Yeah. As of right now, I have my first event that I'll be at remotely. Don, I know you're going to be remotely tuning in as well. We'll be at Tom Reed's UFO Expo, which will be in, is it March? I always get March and April mixed up. Yeah, March, because, okay. So March. And then, again, for the Roswell incident, that will be also happening in Roswell, and then the dig, but that dig's in April tentatively right now. In April, right. So the dig in April 1st, and then you'll see Don and I hopefully together in Roswell for the Roswell Annual Incident Festival, for the Roswell 47 incident. So, and then I will also be in Tennessee, June 10th for a weekend event.
I was right when I said When I was right when I said Bug Tussle, Tennessee. Yes, yes.
Yes, you were. So I'll also be in Tennessee for an alien event of their alien festival. So as we get closer, I'll be posting, of course, on my Facebook and Instagram for them. Wonderful couple. I'm so excited to be a part of the event. It's a 1-day event. Should be really exciting. But yeah, so the first event I'll be at on a panel is at Tom Reed's UFO Expo at Roswell, which is awesome.
All right. This next question is really just for you, Britt. Is it hard to be a female investigator in the world of the paranormal or UFOs?
It's a tricky one. So I've met a lot of female investigators, especially in the ufology community, who feel like they've struggled to find a place because there seems to be a line there where it almost feels like it was I even hate to use the term, but men's world, and it didn't have any place for women. This was a guy bros thing. And we've had those long discussions. I honestly have not experienced any of that. I have had a wonderful opportunity of getting to know many individuals who welcomed me with open arms. And when they realized that I had knowledge of the history and the work, it was almost like a basic line of understanding each other. But I have seen it in a lot of cases where I have watched several females on like podcasts or shows that I have been a part of, or a certain panel that I've been a part of or asked to be a part of. And if they go to say something, it's almost as if they're immediately cut off very quickly, and almost corrected immediately, to where it's almost like, well, no, you're actually wrong about that, when they in fact weren't. And I don't really know the reason why. I don't know why it happens sometimes, but I have seen it. But I think it's way better now than it probably would have been in the early days. I don't think there's too much now. And I personally haven't experienced it, but I've seen it with a few other female investigators in cryptid, in the ghost world, especially mediums dealing with it, and then also in ufology.
Okay, the next question is, have you ever been led astray by a contact giving you misinformation, and why would they do that?
Don, I know you have a story for this. I'm going to let Don handle this one.
Well, one of the things about the Roswell investigation is because of the fact that it's so all-encompassing. Everything else is just a fleeting glimpse of something. Now you see it, now you don't. You may have a photograph, you may have video. It's some rare cases, you may have a landing site where you have swirled grass, broken tree branches, that type of thing. But again, you have no hardware, you have no physical evidence. You have footprints at the crime scene, but you don't have the actual, as far as murderer, so to speak. You don't have the suspect. With Roswell, you have not only physical evidence, you not only have wreckage, but you have, as far as bodies, you have a survivor. Everything was photographed, everything was filmed, and so it would encompass everything that any investigator would want in any one case. And as a result, you have to investigate everything and anything. People that have claimed that they have physical evidence, people that claim they have had photographs, people that claim they have slides, people that claim that they have, as far as something irrefutable that would test positive as far as any lab. And as a result, we have to rely on science. One of the things that I cannot emphasize enough is that through all of that, for having had so many boys crying wolf, so many false alarms, but yet they had to be investigated. Well, what I've learned through all this is I believe in science, but I no longer believe in scientists. Because in each and every case, each and every situation where we had to rely on photo analysis, we had to rely on anthropologists, we've had to rely on archaeologists, geologists, we've had to rely on optics, metricians, as far as experts, as far as doing computer enhancement on photographs. They've been wrong.
Yeah.
And so science is so unabsolute that it's a case of where the messengers are the ones that always get blamed. It's always like, Don, why did you fall for that? Don, why? Because science told us it was genuine. I can't help that. We went to the experts. We performed due diligence. And as a result, I guess because you're the expert on Roswell, you're the investigator, so I accept, like, the buck stops with Don Schmidt. Okay, fine. But as science goes, please stop telling me that science is the end all. Follow the science. I have followed the science for all of my life, and I can honestly say most of the time they have been wrong.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'd have a solution to the UFO phenomenon by now, and we don't.
That's true. That's true.
Well, here's the last question,
A lot
guys.
of faulty science.
This is a good one. Save the best one for last. Does the Roswell case stay alive in pop culture to feed the enterprising people that make money off of it? Or is it to uncover the truth? Or has it just become folklore and everyone just knows the story?
Mhm.
Why does
Go
it
ahead,
stay
Britt.
alive?
Okay, so for my standpoint, it stays alive because honestly, you wouldn't have the UFO community, you wouldn't have the push for transparency, you wouldn't have half the cases that got recognized and were paid attention to by people that were interested if you wouldn't have had Roswell. So for me, Roswell still and will always be the smoking gun, the mark that X the spot on every map that tells you exactly where the treasure is. And it's literally the reason why it stays alive and it comes back to is because you wouldn't have, and we wouldn't be where we are today in the ufology community or in the UFO community without having Roswell. And so I think it becomes relevant and it's brought up for that topic alone. And I know that a lot of us that believe in Roswell believe that that is the Mecca, the mother lode right there. Will always continue to bring it up. And if you were to ask me, I think that those that have the say in government that handle the Roswell and all of the UFO cases would love for Roswell to go away. And the fact is that those of us pushing hard will never allow that to happen, because without Roswell, we wouldn't be where we are today. To prove that something did happen, to have so many eyewitnesses that stood to date to the time that they passed away on their last breath to say that it did happen, their lives are threatened. And that is something that has had a chain reaction through the last 76 years since Roswell. And that's my opinion looking at it coming in now.
30 years ago, when we first approached the city government in Roswell with a concern of the outside exploitation and the creation of almost like a circus environment around what is an historic event. Historically, Roswell happened. Historically, something crashed. Historically, there was a press release where the United States military announced that they had actually captured a flying saucer. No one can deny that. That all is historic fact. And that was when we encouraged the creation of the museum to prevent that tourist attraction element in all this. But human nature being what it is, I don't care if it's the Holy Land, I don't care if it's a battlefield, I don't care if it's Graceland as far as in Memphis, Tennessee. People will always take something famous and try to squeeze every last dime out of it. And more times than not, after the person who they are celebrating, they are commemorating is long gone. It doesn't deny their existence. And in this case, the museum and all the tourists that go to New Mexico, it doesn't deny the fact that Roswell happened. Now, there is another UFO case that has attracted former presidents, senators, congressmen, governors. I often point out that I could have former presidents Clinton and Carter and even Trump and Obama and Bush and the late Senator Barry Goldwater, and the late Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico, and the former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. They could all be on the program this evening, and they all would lament the fact that they couldn't get the truth about Roswell. There isn't a single other UFO case that they could name directly. But Roswell is a household word, not because of the museum, not because of all the documentaries, not because of the movie, but because of the hundreds of eyewitnesses who were brave enough, who went on the record and said before they died, it did happen. They stood up to the United States government, who is now up to 4 official explanations for one event. I always joke, husbands, try that with your wives when you come home too late. Try this one, honey, if you don't like the last explanation. But nonetheless, it's the government. We allow them to get away with it. So it's never going to be reduced to folklore. It's never going to be reduced to becoming mythology, and the investigation continues. It still remains fluid. So one can hardly say that it's been done at the exploitation or for the purpose of making money. And I'm sorry, we write books. What do you think pays for the investigation? We don't receive a dime from the government. We don't receive any grants, any special funding. So how else does the investigation continue, if not for the books and the lectures and the appearances? So thank God that we have the support of the viewers, of the readers, of the audience who stand behind us and are applauding and cheering us on as the race continues. Because right now we're on the 1 yard line of the game. And all we're still missing is that piece of physical evidence that will prove once and for all, prove conclusively that we have been right all along, that it did happen. And it wasn't made here on Mother Earth, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
I'm going with the folklore explanation.
Go ahead, Todd.
Sorry,
Go
guys.
Go ahead.
I think Roswell is no different than Tombstone. Tourist attractions, questionable event, what happened, but people still go.
True.
It brings in the tourists. The museum is there, lining people's pockets. Every paranormal show, any investigative show that comes on TV, there's going to be a Roswell segment because there's money in it.
Yeah.
So
well, let me quickly deflate that, Todd.
Okay.
Then the investigators should be getting a piece of the pie.
I'm sorry, Don, you're cutting out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. It's a bad connection we have here. I'm going to have to finish the show with just Brett.
And that is why, and that's precisely why, and anticipating that impression, that when the museum at the very beginning offered to cut us in, offered to cut the investigators in, offered to fund research, offered to provide us with funding for our archaeological work, we said no. We did not want to become obligated. We did not want to in any way portray ourselves as doing this for no other reason than laughing all the way to the bank. So in other words, when we have our 6th archaeological dig, not a dime comes from Roswell. It is all privately funded.
Well, if we want to go back to something really ironic, we can go back to the Sci-Fi Channel dig, where a University of New Mexico's contract archaeology department was written a big check from Sci-Fi Channel, okay, already science fiction channel, right?
Right.
Whose parent company is General Electric, which has government contracts. So tell me how convoluted that equation is and what the answers were that came out of it.
And it was one of the reasons that we fired the lead archaeologist. We refused to work with the contract archaeology department thereafter because they took a lot of soil samples for particle analysis. And everything was kept at a Wells Fargo bank in Roswell for a full year. And the problem was the university contract archaeology department was paid in advance. So there's no incentive to do anything. So you're absolutely correct, Todd. Here the investigators were clamoring, were champing at the bit, please, will you finish the job you were paid for, that you were hired to do? And again, they are the
lost
ones
all that
who
soil.
had
Actually,
no wire.
all those soil samples actually exploded in that vault.
All contaminated,
Yeah.
contaminated, as though it was intentional.
That's terrible.
So
I
know.
Same question.
Science again, science.
Same question to you, Brett, about Bigfoot. Is it alive in pop culture to make money off of? Is there really research to uncover the truth, or is it just folklore?
I think there's a little bit of everything, honestly, in that whole thing. I think that it's alive in folklore. People love the idea of this beastly creature. I think there's, actual like literature and history to Sasquatch or to Bigfoot. And I honestly think that it's a little bit of everything that keeps the idea of Bigfoot alive. And there's a lot of hardy investigators out there that truly are still, I know several, and I'm one of them. I still believe in it. And, I would love to prove the existence of Bigfoot once and for all. And I think that those investigators do help, but I think pop culture helps too. I mean, look at Bigfoot. I mean, Bigfoot is Bigfoot. There's no way around it. He's amazing. He's awesome. Like, you just imagine this 9 foot ape-like creature running through the woods, whacking sticks on trees to communicate. I'm sorry, I think it's amazing. So yeah, I think that pop culture has a huge impact on Bigfoot. I think the investigators who continue to push for the truth on Bigfoot have a big part of it too, and it'll always be a part of the folklore and legends you tell your kids. It just always will. I think it's a little sprinkling of everything when it comes to Bigfoot. He kind of covers all the bases at a game. I'll tell you that.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I've got for tonight. I can let you guys take it out.
All right. Sounds good. Well, this was fun. I always love when we do these Q&As. I always enjoy hearing the questions, and then, most of the time, Don and I always agree on things, which I think is so funny. We always see a lot of eye to eye, and a lot of our experiences are very similar. So I think it's cool. I always love when we have these Q&As. I learn more about you, Don. A little more every time. A little more. I love it.
I hope it's good, but as you continue to see, I'm very passionate about not only where I've been, but where I still plan to go. And as I often tell colleagues, the train is leaving. Get on. It's going to be a roller coaster, but you're going to have to hold on, because I cannot guarantee what's going to be at the next turn. And that's half the adventure. That's what I love about it. I mean, people love predictability. They hate change. It's what I live for. It's what has made my whole life so exciting. And I've been very blessed. And I consider you as a partner in all this, someone who's up to, that level of excitement, and with a desire that, okay, we survived that one. Like a partner years ago used to often say to me, well, Don, what are we going to do to get ourselves killed today?
Yeah.
So, that's not my intention. No. It's like, how do we get out of this without getting killed? And that's also
Exactly.
happy adventure.
Always have that escape plan. You're going to get out of it one way or another. But I like that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. There's such a thrill to it. And I love the pace of it. You never know what you're going to uncover in ufology, in cryptozoology, in the paranormal field, with dealing with spirits or ghosts, or whatever. There's always ever changing, and you're always learning something new, because there's always something new being developed, or a new technology, or a new technique, or a new, paperwork that they've unearthed. And I think it's all amazing. And I'm along for the ride until I'm done with my own life, till I'm off this earth, because it's a wonderful thing, and I hope to share it with my kids. And honestly, even for our viewers, I encourage you to go go to libraries, read books, take advice from Don on a lot of his work and on his pages of where he talks about what books he recommends, what past authors, past investigators he recommends. I encourage you, if this is a field or an interest of yours and you feel like you really want to know more, get a better grasp of the community or how it all started, I do recommend following Don and some of his past work and letting a lot of his own literature guide you through his books and stuff, because it's very eye-opening and it's a really fun thing to share with the family. And don't be afraid of it. Don't fear what you don't understand, because it's really quite wonderful. And as Don has said many a times, and it's something that I live by now, is don't ever forget that little boy wonderment, as Hynek would say. And I think all of us need to encourage that and have that in our life every single day. So on that, I am done for my closing line. Don, would you like to say anything else? And then I'll tell everybody where they can listen to us.
No, I had already made some closing comments, and I think now we invite everyone to join us again for the next episode, and again for the next roller coaster ride, because we're going to tackle and go after everything that in the past would be considered taboo or never discussed in public or in mixed company, so to speak. But we live in a wonderfully open society in that we hopefully continue to express ourselves without fear of ridicule and mockery, in that the world in itself has so many remaining mysteries. And the fact that the world has not divulged all its secrets.
Yep.
And we're the ones that are at least pulling back the curtain and taking a peek with the hope to bring some of the answers. And we hope you continue to go along for the ride. Thank you.
I agree. Well, and that being said, everyone, it was a wonderful time tonight on the show. And we just want to thank everybody and our guest, Todd, our producer, for coming on and bringing on your questions that you submitted to us. If you are interested in continuing to throw out those odd questions or curious questions, please feel free to email them over to noearthlyexplanation@gmail.com. You can also find us on our handle on Facebook, on Instagram, at No Earthly Explanation. And then you can also find us on anywhere you like to listen to your podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Anchor, Anchor.fm. You can look anywhere. You can find us. You can also find us on our Instagram. It also has lists of areas that you can also locate us to listen to. And if you choose to follow Don or myself, we are all on social media, including our wonderful producer. You can follow him as well. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. Mine is Brit Investigates. So it's Brit_investigates on Instagram, and then Brittany Barbieri on Facebook. And then you can find my partner Don on Instagram at Don47Tom, or on his Facebook page at Donald Raymond Schmidt. And I really encourage everyone to continue to read his books, follow along on this journey of No Earthly Explanation. And until next time, everybody, please keep your eyes on the skies, because it turns out I really don't think we're alone anymore.
A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fischer. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fischer and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure and visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com, or find us on social media for other unique content.